The deafening crack of a rifle shot echoed across the golden wheat fields as Catherine Hayes dropped to her knees, her husband's blood warm on her trembling hands. "James!" She screamed, but his eyes had already gone vacant, his body slumped beside the fence line he'd been repairing when the bullet tore through his chest. She knew immediately who was responsible. Her father-in-law had finally made good on his threats. New Mexico Territory, 1878. The Hayes homestead lay 15 miles outside Raton, situated in a fertile valley that James Hayes had claimed 5 years earlier under the Homestead Act. The modest farm was just beginning to flourish, with fields of wheat and corn, and a small herd of cattle that provided enough income to survive the harsh frontier life. But James's death had changed everything in an instant, leaving Catherine a 24-year-old widow with a 3-year-old son, a mortgage, and in-laws who had coveted their land since the day James staked his claim. Catherine refused to cry as she rode into town the next morning, her son Daniel tucked against her chest. Her auburn hair was pinned severely beneath her bonnet, her green eyes red-rimmed but dry. The sheriff's office sat on the main street of Raton, a dusty outpost that had grown with the arrival of the railroad 2 years prior. Sheriff Walters looked up from his desk when she entered, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, standing, "I heard about James." "My condolences." "It wasn't an accident," Catherine said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "It was Gregory Hayes, my father-in-law." The sheriff's expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Hayes. He threatened us last week. Said if James didn't sell him the farm, he'd take it one way or another." She set Daniel down on a chair, where he quietly played with a wooden toy his father had carved. "I want justice for my husband." Sheriff Walters sighed, running a hand over his gray, flecked beard. "Gregory Hayes has friends in Santa Fe, Mrs. Hayes, powerful friends. I can file a report, but without witnesses." He trailed off. Catherine felt a cold anger settle in her bones. "So he gets away with murder because he knows the governor?" "I didn't say that." "I'll investigate, but these things take time." As Catherine left the sheriff's office, the reality of her situation pressed down on her like a physical weight. Without James, she couldn't maintain the farm alone. The mortgage payment would be due in 2 weeks, and the harvest was still a month away. The general store was busy when Catherine entered, seeking supplies to last until she figured out her next steps. As she waited at the counter, she overheard 2 men talking. "Hayes finally did it," one said quietly. "Got rid of his troublesome son, and now he'll have that prime farmland." "Poor widow," the other replied. "Won't last a week out there alone." Catherine stiffened but kept her eyes forward. Gregory Hayes had made no secret of his desire to expand his ranch. His own lands bordered the Hayes homestead to the north, but the water access on James and Catherine's property made it particularly valuable. James had refused to sell, determined to build something of his own rather than live under his father's thumb. "Mrs. Hayes," Mr. Collins, the store owner, interrupted her thoughts. "I'm sorry about your husband. What can I get for you today?" She handed him her list, adding, "and information if you have it. I need to hire help for the harvest." Collins frowned. "Most able hands are already contracted for the season." He lowered his voice. "And word is that Gregory Hayes has warned people off working for you." Catherine's jaw tightened. "I see." "There's a newcomer in town," Collins added hesitantly. "Been asking about work. He's at the saloon most evenings." "A drunk?" Catherine couldn't hide her disappointment. "No, madam, seems a decent sort. Name's Nathaniel Jackson, former cavalry, I heard." Catherine nodded, filing away the information as she paid for her supplies. She had little choice but to find help or lose everything she and James had worked for. The ride back to the farm was tense. Catherine kept her rifle across her lap, scanning the horizon for any sign of Gregory Hayes or his men. Daniel slept against her, exhausted from the early morning journey. As the farmhouse came into view, Catherine noticed fresh hoofprints in the dirt leading to the barn. She slowed the wagon, heart pounding. "Hello, the house." A deep voice called from near the well. Catherine raised her rifle, aiming at the tall figure that emerged from behind the barn. "State your business." The man raised both hands, showing he was unarmed. "Sorry to startle you, madam. I was just looking for water for my horse." He was tall, with broad shoulders and a lean frame honed by hard work. Dark hair curled beneath his hat and a short beard covered a strong jaw. His eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, held her gaze steadily. "This is private property," Catherine said, not lowering her rifle. "I apologize for trespassing." He gestured to a dappled gray horse tethered near the well. "My horse was parched and I saw the well." Catherine hesitated, then slowly lowered her weapon. "You can water your horse, then move on." The man nodded, then glanced at her wagon. "You need help unloading those supplies?" "I can manage." He studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the fields visible beyond the house. "That wheat needs harvesting soon." "I'm aware," Catherine replied stiffly. "You planning to do it alone?" Daniel stirred against her, waking with a small whimper. The man's gaze softened at the sight of the child. "I'm hiring help," Catherine said. "I'm looking for work." He removed his hat, revealing more of those dark curls. "Nathaniel Jackson, madam," Catherine startled at the name Collins had mentioned. "You're the cavalryman," a shadow crossed his face. "Former cavalry, war's been over a long time." Catherine studied him. He stood straight, with calloused hands and clear eyes. "Not a drunk, at least. I can't pay much until after harvest. Room, board, and fair wages when you sell the crop is all I ask." She should be wary of a stranger, especially a man, but desperation won out over caution. "Do you know farm work, Mr. Jackson? Grew up on a farm in Kansas, madam. I know which end of a plow to hold." Despite everything, Catherine felt herself almost smile. "I'm Catherine Hayes. This is my son, Daniel." Nathaniel nodded to the boy, who watched him with curious eyes so like his father's. "Pleasure to meet you both. You can stay in the bunkhouse," Catherine decided. "It's small, but it's shelter." "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes." "There's one more thing you should know." Catherine squared her shoulders. "My husband was murdered 3 days ago, and his father wants this land. Taking you on might put you in danger." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "I'm no stranger to danger, Mrs. Hayes, and I don't much care for men who prey on widows and children." For the first time since James died, Catherine felt a flicker of hope. The days fell into a rhythm. Nathaniel rose before dawn, tending the livestock before Catherine even left the house. He repaired fences, patched the barn roof, and prepared the equipment for harvest. Catherine found herself watching him from the kitchen window as she prepared meals, impressed by his tireless work ethic. Daniel took to Nathaniel immediately, following him around like a shadow whenever Catherine allowed it. The boy had been withdrawn since his father's death, but something about Nathaniel's calm presence seemed to comfort him. "My daddy's in heaven," Daniel informed Nathaniel one evening as they sat on the porch after supper. Nathaniel nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry about that, partner." "Mama says bad men hurt him." Catherine, who had stepped onto the porch with coffee, felt her breath catch. "Daniel, that's enough. Time for your bath." After she'd put Daniel to bed, Catherine returned to find Nathaniel still on the porch, staring out at the darkening fields. "I apologize for my son's comments," she said quietly. "No need. Children speak truth." Nathaniel accepted the coffee she offered. "Want to tell me what happened to your husband?" Catherine sat beside him, leaving proper distance between them. "James was shot while repairing the north fence line. His father, Gregory Hayes, owns the adjacent property. You believe he's responsible?" "I know he is." Catherine's hands tightened around her cup. "He's wanted this land since James claimed it. The stream that runs through our property is the only year-round water source in the area." "The sheriff investigating," Catherine laughed bitterly. "Sheriff Walters is afraid of Gregory's connections. The Hayes family has money and influence." Nathaniel was silent for a long moment. "When's your mortgage due?" "Next week. I have enough to make the payment, but barely." "And the harvest?" "Another 3 weeks if the weather holds," he nodded. "I noticed some of your cattle are missing their brand." "I haven't had time," Catherine admitted. James usually handled that. I'll take care of it tomorrow, can't have rustlers thinking they're easy pickings. The mention of rustlers sent a chill through Catherine, another threat she hadn't even considered. Thank you. You should know, Nathaniel said carefully, there were men watching the property today, 2 riders on the ridge to the north. Catherine's heart raced. Gregory's men? Likely so. They didn't approach, but they were watching. They'll come eventually, Catherine whispered. Gregory won't stop until he has this land. We'll be ready. Nathaniel's voice was calm but carried a steely undertone. I don't run from bullies, Mrs. Hayes. Catherine studied him in the fading light. Why are you helping me, Mr. Jackson? You don't know me. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, after the war I drifted. Did things I'm not proud of. I've been looking for a place to set things right. And you think that place is here? A widow's farm with a target on it. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. I've faced worse odds. The next morning, Catherine woke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and found Nathaniel reinforcing the barn doors with additional planks. Morning, he called when he saw her. Thought we could use stronger defenses. Catherine nodded, impressed by his foresight. I'll start breakfast. As she turned to go, the thunder of approaching horses made her freeze. Nathaniel was beside her instantly, rifle in hand. Get inside, he ordered. Lock the doors. No, Catherine said firmly, drawing her own rifle from where it rested against the porch. This is my home. 5 riders approached, dust billowing behind them. Gregory Hayes led them, his substantial frame mounted on a large chestnut stallion. At 60, he still cut an imposing figure, with silver-streaked black hair and cold eyes that had never shown Catherine anything but disdain. Catherine, Gregory called as they drew closer. I've come to discuss your situation. There's nothing to discuss, she replied, standing her ground. Gregory's gaze shifted to Nathaniel. I see you found help. Didn't take long to replace my son. Catherine felt her cheeks flush with anger. State your business and leave, Gregory. I'm offering to buy your land. Given your circumstances, it's more than fair. He pulled an envelope from his coat. $10,000, enough to start fresh somewhere else. The amount was substantial, more than fair market value, but Catherine knew what accepting would mean. This land isn't for sale. Gregory's expression hardened. Don't be foolish, girl. A woman alone can't run a farm. She's not alone, Nathaniel said quietly. Gregory's cold gaze assessed Nathaniel. And who might you be? Nathaniel Jackson. I work for Mrs. Hayes. Well, Mr. Jackson, I suggest you find other employment. This farm will be mine one way or another. Is that a threat? Nathaniel's voice remained calm, but his hand rested near his holstered revolver. Gregory smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Simply a statement of fact. Catherine, be reasonable. Think of your boy. I am thinking of him, Catherine replied. This land is his inheritance. Gregory's jaw tightened. The mortgage comes due next week. I've spoken with the bank. They're calling in the loan early due to changed circumstances. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. They can't do that. They can with cause. A widow with no means of supporting the debt is cause enough. Gregory tucked the envelope back in his coat. My offer stands until tomorrow. After that, I'll buy it from the bank for considerably less. As Gregory and his men rode away, Catherine's legs threatened to give out beneath her. Nathaniel caught her elbow, steadying her. He can't do this, she whispered. Banks don't usually call in performing loans, Nathaniel said thoughtfully. Even to widows. Gregory has influence, Catherine replied, and apparently the banker's ear. Then we'll need to get to the bank before tomorrow. The Rattan Bank was housed in a brick building on the main street, one of the few structures not made of wood. Catherine dressed in her best dress, a navy blue garment that had been reserved for church services and special occasions. Daniel, too, was dressed in his finest clothes. Remember, Nathaniel said as he helped them down from the wagon, don't let them bully you. This is your land, legally deeded. Inside, Mr. Finch, the bank manager, looked up with surprise. Mrs. Hayes, I wasn't expecting you until next week. I understand there's been a change to my loan terms, Catherine said, keeping her voice level. Finch's expression grew uncomfortable. Ah, yes. Well, given your husband's passing, the bank must reassess the risk. I have the payment. Catherine placed the money on his desk. In full and on time. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Finch began, but Nathaniel stepped forward. Mr. Finch, correct. At the banker's nod, he continued. I'm curious about the bank's policy on performing loans. Typically, as long as payments are made on schedule, the terms remain fixed. And you are? Finch asked with a frown. Nathaniel Jackson. I work for Mrs. Hayes. He placed his hands on the desk, leaning forward slightly. I'm also acquainted with Judge Morris in Santa Fe. He has a particular interest in banking regulations. Finch swallowed visibly. We're not doing anything illegal, sir. Changing loan terms without cause might be viewed differently by a territorial judge. Nathaniel's voice remained pleasant, but the implication was clear. The concern was Mrs. Hayes's ability to maintain the farm without her husband, Finch said defensively. Mrs. Hayes has hired help, Nathaniel replied. The harvest is on schedule, the cattle are healthy, and as you can see, she has this payment ready. Finch glanced at the money on his desk, then at Catherine and Daniel. After a moment, he sighed. Very well, we'll maintain the original terms. Catherine felt relief flood through her as she watched Finch write out a receipt. As they left the bank, she turned to Nathaniel. Do you really know Judge Morris? The corner of Nathaniel's mouth quirked up. Met him once in a saloon. Doubt he'd remember me. Catherine couldn't help but laugh, the sound startling her after weeks of grief. You bluffed him. Sometimes a good bluff is all you need, Nathaniel replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. But this is just the beginning. Gregory Hayes won't give up so easily. He was right. The next day, they discovered the irrigation channel that fed their fields had been blocked upstream on Hayes' property. The day after that, 2 of their best milk cows were found dead, clearly shot. Catherine watched Nathaniel dig graves for the animals, her anger building with each shovelful of dirt. He's trying to destroy us piece by piece. Yes, Nathaniel agreed, wiping sweat from his brow, but he's also getting desperate. These are the actions of a man who's realized he can't win legally. What do? We prepare, Nathaniel said simply, and we watch our backs. Preparation came in many forms over the next week. Nathaniel taught Catherine to shoot more accurately with her rifle. They reinforced doors and windows, stockpiled supplies, and moved the cattle closer to the house where they could be better protected. They also began the harvest, working from dawn until dusk to bring in the wheat before it over-ripened. The work was exhausting but necessary. Without the crop, they would have no income to sustain them through winter. Despite the circumstances, Catherine found herself noticing small moments of Joy Daniel's laughter as he helped gather eggs, the satisfaction of a good day's work, the quiet companionship she and Nathaniel shared during evening meals. She caught herself watching him more often, admiring the strength in his hands, the kindness in his eyes when he spoke to Daniel. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Daniel asleep inside, Catherine asked, "Where will you go after the harvest?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "Haven't thought that far ahead." "You must have plans," Catherine pressed. "Family somewhere." "No family," he said softly. "Lost my parents before the war, no siblings." "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "Been on my own a long time, got used to it." "What about during the war? You must have had friends in your unit." A shadow crossed his face. "I did, good men." "Most didn't make it home." Catherine sensed his reluctance to speak about it and changed the subject. "Daniel adores you." Nathaniel's expression softened. "He's a good boy. Smart, too." "Like his father," Catherine said automatically, then felt the familiar pang of grief. "Tell me about him," Nathaniel said. "If you want to, that is." Catherine realized she did want to talk about James. He was kind, stubborn as a mule when he believed in something. He came west with dreams of building something that was truly his, not his father's. That's why he claimed this land instead of working his father's ranch. Exactly. Gregory wanted James to take over the ranch eventually, but on Gregory's terms. James wanted his own path. She smiled sadly. He was so proud when we got the deed to this place. He sounds like a good man. He was. Catherine looked out at the fields they'd worked so hard to cultivate. I won't let Gregory take this from us. It's all Daniel has left of his father. Nathaniel nodded, his gaze following hers. We won't let that happen. The intensity in his voice made her look at him. In the fading light, his blue eyes seemed deeper, more resolute. Something passed between them than an understanding, a shared purpose. Catherine felt her heart quicken and looked away, unsettled by the feeling. It's getting late, she said, rising from her chair. We should both get some rest. Nathaniel stood as well, keeping a respectful distance. Good night, Mrs. Hayes, Catherine, she said impulsively. You can call me Catherine. He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. Good night, Catherine. Good night, Nathaniel. That night, Catherine lay awake longer than usual, her thoughts drifting to the man in the bunkhouse and the way her name had sounded in his deep voice. The harvest continued steadily over the next week. The weather held, allowing them to work without interruption. Nathaniel proved himself not only strong but skilled, teaching Catherine more efficient methods for cutting and binding the wheat. They were nearly finished when the trouble came again. Catherine was in the kitchen, preparing the midday meal, when she heard Daniel scream from the front yard. She dropped the knife she was using and ran outside to find two of Gregory's men on horseback, one holding Daniel by the arm. Let him go, Catherine screamed, rushing forward. The man holding Daniel, she recognized him as Lyle Peterson, one of Gregory's longtime ranch hands grinned maliciously. Mr. Hayes wants to see his grandson, thought we'd oblige. Take your hands off him. Catherine grabbed for Daniel, but the second man maneuvered his horse between them. Now, Mrs. Hayes, don't make this difficult, he said. The boy should know his grandfather. Daniel was sobbing, struggling against Lyle's grip. Mama, Mama, I said, let him go. The cold voice behind Catherine made everyone freeze. Nathaniel stood at the corner of the house, rifle aimed steadily at Lyle's head. This isn't your business, Jackson, the second man said. I'm making it my business. Nathaniel's finger rested on the trigger. Let the boy go, or I put a bullet between your eyes. Something in his voice, the absolute certainty of his threat, made Lyle hesitate. His grip on Daniel loosened. Mr. Hayes won't like this, he warned. Mr. Hayes isn't here, Nathaniel replied. I am, and I don't miss at this distance. Lyle released Daniel, who ran to Catherine. She gathered him into her arms, heart pounding. Tell Gregory Hayes, Nathaniel continued, rifle still raised, that if he sends men for the boy again, I'll kill them, and then I'll come for him. The two men exchanged glances, then slowly backed their horses away. This ain't over, Lyle called as they turned to ride off. No, Nathaniel agreed quietly, it isn't. Once they were out of sight, Catherine sank to her knees, holding Daniel tightly as he cried against her shoulder. Nathaniel knelt beside them, his hand gentle on the boy's back. Are you hurt, partner? He asked softly. Daniel shook his head, hiccuping through his tears. He grabbed me. I know, you were very brave. Nathaniel looked at Catherine, his eyes dark with anger. Taking a child, there's no honor in that. Catherine nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The thought of what might have happened if Nathaniel hadn't been there made her shudder. They'll be back, she finally managed. Yes. Nathaniel's jaw was set in a hard line. But not today, let's get you both inside. That night, after Daniel had finally fallen asleep, Catherine found Nathaniel cleaning his rifle on the porch. I can't thank you enough, she said, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the evening chill. Nathaniel set the rifle aside. No need for thanks. There is, Catherine insisted. You put yourself at risk for us, again. I meant what I said to those men, Nathaniel replied, his voice hard. Anyone tries to take that boy, they'll answer to me. The fierceness of his protection moved her deeply. Why do you care so much? You barely know us. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. During the war, I saw too many innocent people caught in conflicts not of their making. I swore if I survived, I'd never stand by while the powerful preyed on the vulnerable. He looked up at her, his expression earnest. You and Daniel deserve to be safe on your own land. It's as simple as that. But Catherine sensed it wasn't simple at all. There was more to Nathaniel Jackson than he revealed, depths of experience and pain that had shaped him into the man before her. After what happened today, she said carefully, I'd feel safer if you stayed in the house. The spare room upstairs, it's small, but… That wouldn't be proper, Nathaniel said, though she caught the hesitation in his voice. Propriety matters less than my son's safety. Catherine met his gaze steadily. Please, at least until the harvest is complete. After a long moment, Nathaniel nodded. All right, until the harvest is done. The days that followed settled into a new routine. Nathaniel rose early, checked the property, then joined Catherine and Daniel for breakfast. They worked the fields together during the day, taking turns watching for trouble. In the evenings, Catherine prepared dinner while Nathaniel entertained Daniel with stories or simple wooden toys he carved. Having him in the house changed things in ways Catherine hadn't anticipated. The rooms felt less empty, the silence less oppressive. Daniel's nightmares, frequent since James's death, decreased. And Catherine found herself looking forward to those quiet evening hours when the three of them sat together by the fire. The harvest was nearly complete when Sheriff Walters rode out to the farm one afternoon. Catherine spotted him from the field and set down her scythe, wiping sweat from her brow as she walked to meet him. Mrs. Hayes, the sheriff greeted her, tipping his hat. I need to speak with you and your hired man. Is something wrong? Catherine asked, though she already suspected the answer. Gregory Hayes has filed complaints, says your man threatened his ranch hands. After they tried to kidnap my son, Catherine retorted. Sheriff Walters frowned. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Nathaniel approached from behind Catherine, his expression guarded. They grabbed the boy from the yard. I intervened. The sheriff studied him. With threats of violence, I hear. I protected a child from being taken against his mother's will, Nathaniel replied evenly. If that required threats, so be it. Sheriff Walters sighed. Look, I don't want trouble here, but Gregory Hayes is pushing for charges. Against me? Nathaniel asked. Against both of you. He claims Mrs. Hayes has no legal right to the farm now that James is gone and that you're trespassing. Catherine's anger flared. That's absurd. James and I owned this land jointly. I have the deed to prove it. I believe you, the sheriff said, raising a placating hand. But Hayes has influence with Judge Parker. He's pushing for an eviction order. On what grounds? Nathaniel demanded. Claims the original homestead agreement required the male head of household to maintain residency. With James gone. He trailed off uncomfortably. Catherine felt her blood run cold. That can't be legal. It's a gray area, Sheriff Walters admitted. The law wasn't written with widows in mind. So a woman can lose her home simply because her husband dies. Catherine's voice rose with indignation. I've maintained this land. I've met every requirement of the Homestead Act. I'm just warning you, the sheriff said. Hayes won't stop until he gets what he wants. Neither will I, Catherine replied firmly. After the sheriff left, Catherine paced the kitchen, her mind racing. He can't take our land, he can't. Nathaniel leaned against the doorframe, watching her. The deed is in both your names. Yes. James insisted on it when we filed the final paperwork last year. She stopped pacing. But what if the sheriff is right? What if the law has some loophole Gregory can exploit? Then we fight it, Nathaniel said simply. In court if necessary, Catherine laughed bitterly. With what money? Gregory has the best lawyers in the territory. We'll find a way. Nathaniel crossed the room to stand before her. Catherine, I won't let him take your home. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. They stood close, closer than propriety allowed, but Catherine couldn't bring herself to step away. Why? She whispered. Why risk so much for us? Nathaniel's gaze dropped to her lips for the briefest moment, then back to her eyes. Because you're worth fighting for. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken feelings. For one breathless moment, Catherine thought he might kiss her, and more startling was the realization that she wanted him to. The spell broke when Daniel called from upstairs, having woken from his nap. Nathaniel stepped back immediately and Catherine turned toward the stairs, her heart pounding. "I should check on him," she said, her voice unsteady. Nathaniel nodded. "I'll finish in the west field." As he walked away, Catherine pressed a hand to her flushed cheek, unsettled by the intensity of her reaction to him. It had been barely 2 months since James died, too soon for such feelings. Yet she couldn't deny the growing attachment she felt toward the quiet, honorable man who had stood by them through so much. The following day they completed the harvest. The wheat was bundled and ready to be taken to town for sale. If all went well, it would provide enough income to sustain them through winter and into spring planting. "We should celebrate," Catherine said as they stored the last of the tools. "A special dinner tonight," Nathaniel smiled. "That would be nice." She prepared a feast with what they had: roast chicken, potatoes from their garden, fresh bread, and an apple pie. Daniel helped set the table, carefully placing the plates just as Catherine showed him. Dinner was a joyous affair, with more laughter than their house had heard in weeks. Daniel regaled them with a story about a frog he'd found near the well, complete with dramatic hopping demonstrations that had both adults chuckling. After Daniel was tucked in bed, Catherine and Nathaniel sat on the porch with cups of coffee, enjoying the cool evening air. "Thank you," Catherine said softly, "for everything. We couldn't have done this without you." "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for," Nathaniel replied. "You would have found a way, perhaps, but I'm glad I didn't have to." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "Will you stay, after we sell the wheat, I mean?" Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want me to?" The simple question hung in the air between them. Catherine took a deep breath. "Yes, Daniel needs you, and—" She met his gaze. "I need you too." Something flickered in his blue eyes, hope, perhaps, or relief. "Then I'll stay as long as you want me." The moment was interrupted by the distant sound of horses approaching. Nathaniel stood immediately, reaching for his rifle. "Get inside," he ordered. "Wake Daniel and take him to the cellar." Catherine didn't argue, rushing into the house to gather her sleepy son. As she hurried him down the cellar steps, she heard men's voices outside, then Nathaniel's deeper tone responding. "Stay here," she whispered to Daniel, settling him in a corner where blankets were stored. "Don't come out until I come for you." "Mama, I'm scared," he whimpered. "I know, sweetheart, but you're safe here." She kissed his forehead. "I'll be back soon." Catherine grabbed her shotgun from where it was stored on a high shelf in the cellar, then crept back up the stairs. Through the window, she could see Nathaniel standing on the porch, rifle held casually but ready. Gregory Hayes sat on horseback in the yard, flanked by 6 armed men. "This is my final offer, Jackson," Gregory was saying. $500 to ride away tonight, leave the widow to face reality." "Not interested," Nathaniel replied calmly. "Then you're a fool. Judge Parker signed the eviction order this afternoon. By law, this land belongs to the Hayes estate now." Gregory's voice carried clearly in the night air. "Catherine has until noon tomorrow to vacate." Catherine's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a cry of shock. How could the judge have ruled so quickly, without even hearing her side? "Show me this order," Nathaniel demanded. Gregory reached into his coat and withdrew a paper, which he handed to one of his men to deliver to Nathaniel. In the lamplight from the porch, Catherine could see Nathaniel reading it carefully. "This is based on false premises," Nathaniel said finally. "The deed is in Catherine's name as well as James's. She has every legal right to this property." "The judge disagreed," Gregory said smugly. "The original homestead claim was in James's name alone. The later deed transfer wasn't properly filed." Catherine felt her blood run cold. They had filed the paperwork. She'd been there when James handed it to the clerk, but if it hadn't been properly recorded. "I'm taking what's mine," Gregory continued. "The question is whether blood will be spilled in the process." "If you want this land," Nathaniel said, his voice deadly quiet, "you'll have to go through me to get it." Gregory laughed. "1 man against 7, those are poor odds even for a former cavalry officer. I've faced worse." Gregory's amusement faded. "Don't be a martyr for someone else's cause, Jackson. This isn't your fight." "I made it my fight." Nathaniel's stance shifted subtly, his rifle angling upward. "Now get off this property." The tension crackled in the air as neither man backed down. Finally, Gregory sighed. "Have it your way." "Noon tomorrow." He turned his horse. "Oh, and Jackson, when this is over, I'll make sure they bury you properly. Unlike my son." The crude remark made Catherine gasp audibly. Gregory's head turned toward the window where she stood, a cruel smile spreading across his face when he spotted her. "Ah, there she is. Catherine, be reasonable. Take your boy and whatever belongings you can carry. Start fresh somewhere else." Catherine stepped onto the porch beside Nathaniel. "This is my home, Gregory. I won't be bullied off of it." "Then you'll be carried off." Gregory's eyes were cold. "Noon tomorrow." As the riders departed, Catherine's legs threatened to give out beneath her. Nathaniel's arm came around her waist, steadying her. "He can't do this," she whispered. "He can't." "We need to prepare," Nathaniel said grimly. "He'll come with more men tomorrow." Catherine nodded, forcing herself to think clearly. "Daniel, I need to get him." Together, they brought Daniel up from the cellar. The boy was frightened but calm, clinging to Catherine as she carried him to his bed. "I need to check on him through the night," Catherine said as she rejoined Nathaniel downstairs. "Of course." Nathaniel was checking his weapons, the rifle, his revolver, and a knife he kept in his boot. "We should barricade the doors and windows, create defensible positions." Catherine watched him, the reality of their situation sinking in. "He'll kill you, all of them against just you." "I won't make it easy for them," Nathaniel replied, but they both knew the odds were nearly impossible. "We could leave," Catherine suggested, hating the words even as she said them. "Find a lawyer, fight this legally." Nathaniel looked up, his eyes gentle but resolute. "If we leave now, we'll never get it back. Gregory will make sure of that." "Then what do we do?" Catherine's voice broke. "I can't let you die for our land." Nathaniel set his weapons aside and crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "Catherine, I've been running from something for years, drifting, never belonging anywhere, never standing for anything." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "For the first time since the war, I've found someone worth fighting for." Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. "I can't lose you too." The admission hung in the air between them, revealing feelings neither had fully acknowledged. Nathaniel's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle. "You won't," he promised, though they both knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. The hours passed in tense preparation. They moved furniture to create barriers, loaded every weapon in the house, and filled buckets of water in case of fire. Through it all, they moved in sync, communicating with few words, united in purpose. As dawn broke, Catherine checked on Daniel one last time before joining Nathaniel at the kitchen table, where he'd spread out a rough map of the property. "They'll likely come from the main road," he explained. "We have sight lines here and here." He pointed to positions on the map. "The barn provides cover if we need it." Catherine nodded, committing the strategy to memory. "I'm a good shot. My father taught me, I know." Nathaniel's lips quirked in a half-smile. "I've seen you shoot." A knock at the front door startled them both. Nathaniel was on his feet instantly, revolver drawn. "Stay here," he ordered, moving cautiously to the window. To their surprise, Sheriff Walters stood on the porch alone, his expression grave. Nathaniel opened the door cautiously, keeping his body angled to shield Catherine. "Sheriff," he greeted warily. "Jackson, Mrs. Hayes." The sheriff removed his hat. "I heard about the eviction order." "It's based on lies," Catherine said, stepping forward. "The deed transfer was filed. James and I both signed it." Sheriff Walters nodded. "I believe you." "That's why I went through the county records last night." He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. "Found this filed under H for Hayes instead of with the land records. It's your deed, properly registered and signed by the territorial clerk." Catherine's hand trembled as she took the paper, unfolding it to see her and James's signatures at the bottom. "It's valid, completely legal. This property belongs to you, Mrs. Hayes." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "I should have looked harder when you first came to me. I apologize for that." "Does Gregory know?" Nathaniel asked. "Not yet. I came straight here when I found it." The sheriff's expression darkened. "I also heard he's gathering men for something today. I can't officially intervene in what might be a private dispute, but—" He hesitated, then continued, "I've telegraphed the U.S. Marshal in Santa Fe. He should be here by nightfall." Hope surged in Catherine's chest if they could hold out until the marshal arrived. "Thank you, Sheriff," she said sincerely. "Just doing my job, finally." Sheriff Walters replaced his hat. "I'll be in town if you need me, but I can't officially take sides in this." "We understand," Nathaniel said, shaking the man's hand. After the sheriff departed, Catherine clutched the deed to her chest. "We have a chance." "A better one," Nathaniel agreed. "But Gregory won't give up easily. He'll still come." "Then we'll be ready," Catherine said with newfound determination. They continued their preparations with renewed vigor. Nathaniel suggested moving some of the cattle to the far pasture, away from potential fighting. Catherine packed a bag for Daniel with provisions in case they needed to flee quickly. As noon approached, Catherine went upstairs to check on Daniel one last time. She found him sitting on his bed, clutching the wooden horse Nathaniel had carved for him. "Mama, are the bad men coming back?" he asked, his small face solemn. Catherine sat beside him, drawing him close. "Yes, sweetheart, but Nathaniel and I will protect you. I need you to be very brave today." "Like Papa was brave," Catherine swallowed hard. "Yes, exactly like that." She helped him dress, then led him downstairs where Nathaniel waited. The three of them shared a simple meal, though none had much appetite. "When they come," Nathaniel explained to Daniel, "you'll hide in the special place Mama and I prepared. It's like a game of hide and seek, but you must stay hidden until one of us comes for you." Daniel nodded seriously. "I can do that." "Good man." Nathaniel ruffled his hair affectionately. Shortly before noon, they heard the distant thunder of approaching horses. Nathaniel moved to the window, his expression hardening. "At least a dozen men," he reported. "Gregory's in front." Catherine's heart pounded as she lifted Daniel, carrying him to the hidden space they'd created behind a false panel in the pantry. "Remember, stay quiet no matter what you hear." "I will, Mama," Daniel promised, his eyes wide with fear but determined. Catherine kissed his forehead, then closed the panel, ensuring it blended seamlessly with the wall. When she returned to the main room, Nathaniel handed her a loaded rifle. "Stay behind cover," he instructed. "Don't expose yourself unless absolutely necessary." Catherine nodded, positioning herself by a window with a clear view of the approaching riders. Nathaniel took his place at the front of the house, rifle ready. Gregory Hayes reined his horse to a stop in the yard, his men fanning out behind him. Catherine counted 14 riders, all armed. "Noon, Jackson," Gregory called. "Time's up." Nathaniel stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. "You're trespassing, Hayes," Gregory laughed. "I think you're confused about who owns this property." "Catherine Hayes owns this property," Nathaniel replied calmly. "Legally deeded and properly filed. Sheriff Walters found the paperwork this morning." For the first time, Gregory's confident expression faltered. "You're lying." "The U.S. Marshal is on his way from Santa Fe to enforce the deed," Nathaniel continued. "He should be here by sunset. You're welcome to wait and discuss it with him." Murmurs spread through Gregory's men. Catherine could see uncertainty on some of their faces. They'd signed up to enforce a legal eviction, not to commit a crime against a widow. Gregory's face flushed with anger. "This changes nothing. The land should have been mine from the start. James stole it from under me." "Your son claimed unclaimed land legally," Nathaniel corrected. "And now it belongs to his widow and child. The law is clear." "The law," Gregory spat. "I am the law in these parts." "Not anymore," came a new voice. Everyone turned to see Sheriff Walters riding up, accompanied by several men Catherine recognized as townspeople from Raton. What is this?" Gregory demanded. "Insurance," Sheriff Walters replied, dismounting. "I figured you might need some persuading to respect the law." He nodded to the men with him, the blacksmith, the general store owner, several farmers. These men volunteered to make sure things stay peaceful until the marshal arrives. Gregory's face contorted with rage. "You're taking their side, after everything I've done for this town." "I'm upholding the law," the sheriff replied firmly. "Mrs. Hayes has legal title to this property. Any attempt to remove her by force would be a crime." The standoff stretched taut as Gregory weighed his options. Several of his men shifted uncomfortably on their horses, clearly reconsidering their involvement. "Your choice, Gregory," Sheriff Walters said. "Leave peacefully or wait for the marshal and explain your actions to him." For a terrible moment, Catherine thought Gregory might order his men to attack anyway. His hand hovered near his holstered revolver, his eyes burning with hatred. Then, abruptly, the fight seemed to leave him. His shoulders sagged, and he spat on the ground in disgust. "This isn't over," he growled, yanking his horse around. "Actually, it is," Nathaniel called after him. "If you or any of your men set foot on this property again or threaten Catherine or Daniel in any way, you'll answer to me." Gregory paused, glancing back with cold eyes. "You've made a powerful enemy today, Jackson." "Better me than them," Nathaniel replied steadily. With a final venomous glare, Gregory rode away, his men following. Several looked back apologetically, including Lyle Peterson, who raised a hand in what might have been acknowledgement or apology. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Catherine allow herself to breathe. She set her rifle aside with trembling hands and went to retrieve Daniel from his hiding place. "Is it over, Mama?" he asked as she lifted him into her arms. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. "It's over." Outside, the sheriff and townspeople were speaking with Nathaniel. Catherine carried Daniel out to join them, overwhelmed by the support of her neighbors. "We should have stepped up sooner," Mr. Collins from the general store admitted. "Gregory Hayes has bullied this community for too long." "Thank you," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you." The men departed after assurances they would return if needed, leaving Catherine, Daniel, and Nathaniel standing in the yard with Sheriff Walters. "The marshal will still come," the sheriff explained. "He'll want statements from both of you about Gregory's threats and actions. Might be enough to bring charges." "Will that be necessary?" Catherine asked, thinking of Daniel. "I just want peace." The sheriff considered this. "That's your decision. But having the law clearly on your side might be the only thing that keeps Gregory Hayes in check." After the sheriff left, promising to return with the marshal, Catherine felt the tension of the past weeks finally break. She sat heavily on the porch steps, Daniel leaning against her side. Nathaniel joined them, his face showing the same relief she felt. "It's really over," he said softly. "Because of you," Catherine replied. "You stood with us when no one else would." "Not entirely true," Nathaniel nodded toward town. "Your neighbors stood up when it mattered." "Only after you showed them how." Catherine reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you, Nathaniel, for everything." The U.S. Marshal arrived that evening as promised. He took detailed statements from both Catherine and Nathaniel about Gregory's threats and actions, including the attempt to take Daniel and the fraudulent eviction order. "This is serious business," the marshal said gravely. "Attempted land theft, child abduction, falsifying legal documents. Mr. Hayes could face significant charges." "What will happen to him?" Catherine asked. "That depends on whether you wish to press charges, madam," Catherine considered carefully. "I want him to leave us in peace. That's all I've ever wanted." The marshal nodded, understanding. "Sometimes the threat of charges is more effective than the charges themselves. I'll have a conversation with Mr. Hayes, make the consequences of further harassment very clear." True to his word, the marshal rode to Gregory's ranch the following morning. When he returned to the Hayes farm that afternoon, his expression was satisfied. "Mr. Hayes has agreed to cease all actions against you and your property," he informed Catherine. He's also agreed to sell his ranch and leave the territory. Catherine's eyes widened in shock. He's leaving. By the end of the month, the marshal confirmed. I made it clear that the alternative was a very public trial and likely prison time. After the marshal departed, Catherine found Nathaniel in the barn, mending a harness. Did you hear? Gregory's leaving the territory. Nathaniel looked up, surprised. For good, according to the marshal, he's selling the ranch. Catherine sat beside him on a hay bale. It's over, really over. Nathaniel set aside his work, studying her face. How do you feel about that? Relieved. Mostly. She hesitated. James would have been sad to see his father leave like this, despite everything. They were estranged, but they were still family. You have a generous heart, Catherine Hayes, Nathaniel said softly. She smiled, then remembered something. You promised to stay until the wheat was sold. I did. We haven't taken it to market yet. A smile tugged at his lips. That's true. After that. Catherine took a deep breath. I still need help with the farm if you're interested in a permanent position. What position did you have in mind? Nathaniel asked, his blue eyes intent on hers. Catherine's courage nearly failed her, but she pressed on. Partner, in every sense of the word. Nathaniel went still, his expression unreadable. Catherine, I know it's too soon, she rushed on. James has only been gone a few months, but life is short and uncertain. I've learned that all too well. She met his gaze directly. I care for you, Nathaniel. Daniel adores you, and I hope you might feel something for us too. Nathaniel reached for her hand, his touch gentle. I do, more than I thought possible, he hesitated, but I want to be sure. For all of us. Catherine nodded, understanding. Then stay, help me run this farm, let's take time to know each other better. I'd like that, Nathaniel said, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. Very much. The fall passed in a flurry of activity. They took the wheat to market, receiving a fair price that would sustain them through winter. Gregory Hayes departed as promised, selling his ranch to a family from Colorado who introduced themselves politely and offered neighborly assistance if ever needed. As winter settled over the land, blanketing the fields in snow, the Hayes farmhouse glowed with warmth and comfort. Daniel flourished under the combined attention of Catherine and Nathaniel, growing stronger and more talkative with each passing day. He no longer asked about the bad men, instead chattering about the new calf in the barn or the wooden animals Nathaniel carved for him. Nathaniel moved back to the bunkhouse once the threat from Gregory passed, maintaining propriety despite the growing closeness between him and Catherine. They spent their evenings together after Daniel was asleep, talking beside the fire, learning each other's stories, dreams, and fears. Catherine learned that Nathaniel had served with distinction in the Union cavalry, but had been haunted by the things he'd seen and done. After the war, he'd drifted westward, taking work where he could find it, never settling anywhere for long. I was running, he admitted one snowy evening. From memories, from myself. And now, Catherine asked, her heart in her throat. Nathaniel's gaze was steady, warm. Now I've found something worth staying for. On Christmas Eve, with Daniel fast asleep dreaming of the presents Father Christmas might bring, Nathaniel presented Catherine with a small wooden box he'd carved himself. It's not much, he said apologetically, but I wanted you to have something. Inside lay a delicate silver ring with a small pearl set into the band. It was my mother's, Nathaniel explained, the only thing I have left from her. Catherine looked from the ring to his face, her heart pounding. Nathaniel, I'm not asking yet, he said quickly. It's too soon and I respect that, but I wanted you to know my intentions. He took her hand. I love you, Catherine, you and Daniel. When you're ready, if you're ready, I want to build a life with you both. Tears filled Catherine's eyes. I love you too, she whispered. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, filled with promise rather than passion. When they pulled apart, Catherine felt a certainty she hadn't expected that this was right, that James would approve, that they deserved happiness after so much sorrow. Spring arrived with new beginnings. The fields turned green, calves were born, and the orchard blossomed with fragrant white flowers. On a perfect April day, with Daniel serving as ring-bearer, Catherine Hayes became Catherine Jackson in a simple ceremony behind their farmhouse, surrounded by friends from town. Sheriff Walters attended, as did Mr. Collins and the other neighbors who had stood with them against Gregory Hayes. Even the new owners of the neighboring ranch came, bringing a fine heifer as a wedding gift. As the guests celebrated with food and music, Nathaniel led Catherine away for a quiet moment alone. "Happy?" he asked, his arms around her waist. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He kissed her forehead. "I promise you, Catherine Jackson, I will protect and cherish you and Daniel for the rest of my days. And I promise to stand by you through whatever comes," she replied. "This is our land, our life, our family." They sealed the promise with a kiss as the sun set over their fields, painting the land they had fought for in gold. In the years that followed, the Jackson farm prospered. Catherine and Nathaniel welcomed 2 more children, twin boys named James and William, who grew strong alongside their older brother Daniel. The farmhouse expanded to accommodate the growing family, with rooms added for the children and a larger kitchen where Catherine taught her sons to bake bread and make preserves. Nathaniel proved to be a patient, loving father to all 3 boys, teaching them to ride, hunt, and care for the land that would one day be theirs. Daniel, now 10, still sometimes spoke of his birth father, keeping James Hayes's memory alive through stories Catherine shared. "Papa James is watching over us from heaven," Daniel explained seriously to his younger brothers. "And Papa Nathaniel watches over us here." The simplicity of his understanding brought tears to Catherine's eyes when she overheard it. Gregory Hayes never returned to Raton. They heard through occasional letters from the marshal that he had settled in California, remarried, and rarely spoke of New Mexico or the son he had lost. Catherine sent him a photograph of Daniel once a year, fulfilling a promise she had made to herself to never completely sever the connection between grandfather and grandson. The photographs were never acknowledged, but she continued to send them nonetheless. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Nathaniel took Catherine to the north fence line where James had been killed. A small memorial stone marked the spot, with wildflowers growing around it that the boys refreshed regularly. "I think about him sometimes," Nathaniel admitted. "Wonder if he would approve of the way I'm raising his son, caring for his land." Catherine squeezed his hand. "He would be grateful, Nate. Grateful that his family is loved and his dreams for this place live on." Nathaniel nodded, then surprised her by kneeling in the grass. "I have something for you." He withdrew a small package from his pocket. Inside lay a delicate gold locket. When Catherine opened it, she found tiny portraits of all 3 boys on one side and Nathaniel on the other. "For your heart to match what's in it," he explained, helping her fasten it around her neck. "It's perfect," she whispered, touching the precious gift. "Like our life together." As they walked back toward the farmhouse, hand in hand, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the deepest grief had come unexpected joy. From the threat of losing everything, they had gained so much more. The Hayes-Jackson farm became known throughout the county for its prosperity and hospitality. Travelers were always welcome at their table, and many a weary cowboy found temporary work and a kind word when passing through. "You've built something special here," Sheriff Walters, now retired, told them at the Harvest Festival one autumn. "Something that will last." Catherine, watching Nathaniel swing their youngest son onto his shoulders while Daniel and James raced each other through the festival games, smiled in agreement. "We built it together," she said. "All of us." The story of how Catherine Hayes had stood her ground against those who would take her farm and of the cowboy who had stood beside her, when no one else would, became something of a legend in Raton. It was retold on winter evenings and at community gatherings, embellished over time but true in its essence. But the best part of the story, Catherine often thought, wasn't in the telling. It was in the living of it, day by day, season by season, in the home she and Nathaniel had fought for and the family they had created together. And as she stood on their porch each evening, watching the sun set over their land with Nathaniel's arm around her waist and their children's laughter in the air, Catherine knew with absolute certainty that this moment, this life was worth every struggle they had endured to claim it.